Welcome to the seventh of these broadcasts for HIS381, The Great Migration. And I'm going to test you to see whether you actually have looked at these. Here I'm going to mention that perhaps I don't have any trousers on, and then I should do these because, look, I can only be seen from the top, so hey, it could be the case. Although I am at work, as you can probably see, it would be disturbing for anybody looking through that window to see somebody with no trousers. It is a public place, so I actually will have them on. Never mind. Anyway, let's skate through these a bit quicker. Here we have, as I was talking about the Second World War, the Double V for Victory campaign. Here we have the 8th Philip Randolph, the March on Washington. This is a fascinating march because it actually inspired the 1963 March on Washington. And in fact, it was 8th Philip Randolph who was behind it, and Bayard Rustin. In 1941, they had discussed organizing a march to Washington to protest against discrimination in the defense industry. So in May, Randolph issued this call, and it's very difficult to tell whether the estimation of 100,000 was accurate or not. The black press, of course, played it up, but it was possible that very few people might have come. But Franklin D. Roosevelt tried to persuade them not to call it off, and finally he issued Executive Order 8802 barring discrimination in defense industries. And this was a major victory for Randolph and for those who had been involved in this campaign. The Congress on Racial Equality was formed in 1942 as the Committee of Racial Equality by an interracial group of students including Bernice Fisher, James R. Robertson, James Farmer Jr., who appears again in the 1960s, and all of these other people. Many of these students were members of the Chicago branch of the Fellowship of Reconciliation, a pacifist organization seeking to change racist attitudes. The founders of CORE were deeply influenced by Mahatma Gandhi and his teachings of nonviolent resistance. In 1947, CORE sent 8 white and 8 black men into the Upper South to test a Supreme Court judgment that declared that segregation on interstate travel was unconstitutional. 4 of their riders were arrested in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and 3, including Bayard Rustin, were forced to work on a chain gang. So we're going back a little bit to discuss race in how African Americans fared in the interwar years. First of all, Marcus Garvey. We talked about this in AMS 204, so hopefully you're familiar with Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey, of course, preached black is beautiful. He was the first to do that. But he also preached that African Americans should return to Africa just as Jews had to Israel, and that African homeland was the place to go. He envisaged an African continent, never having been there, that would welcome African Americans and Jamaicans, as he was, back, and he was elected president of Africa without ever having stepped there by his organization. He was one of the forerunners of black nationalism, but he was also very full of pomp, and you can see there the Minister for Education, I'm guessing, wearing a mortarboard, and there is Marcus Garvey himself. He was fond of flamboyant costumes, if you like, and these he thought were fitting for somebody who had pretensions of running their own nation for the purpose of African Americans finding a home, and for those of African background everywhere else to return to and to claim as their own. We also must talk about W.B. Du Bois. Du Bois is perhaps the most important character, the most important intellectual, black intellectual, certainly of the 20th century. And he's a fascinating character, very intelligent man, first African American to take a PhD from Harvard University, and also one of the first to attend Heidelberg University. And W.B. Du Bois is well worth talking about. The other thing about W.B. Du Bois is that he was fairly light-skinned and didn't even understand that he was black when he was first born. We've talked about this in AMS 204, so I won't labor the point, but please do look up W.B. Du Bois. He might be very interesting on exams.